If you listen to the show, you already know that we cannot exist without our sponsors. They are the ones who make things happen behind the scenes. So let's acknowledge Fuji Sports. We've been working with these guys for a while now, not only as far as this podcast is concerned, but also at the RŌL Academy. We've had their gear. I personally use their gis. What a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I mean, jiu-jitsu, judo, MMA, tape, bags, anything you need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk RŌL TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at RŌL Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armin Fati, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there are so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, you know, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code RŌL Radio at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. Today's guest has been on the New Jersey martial arts scene for over 40 years, starting off in the striking arts, he earned his black belt in Taekwondo, Muay Kwon, and was going to specialize in weapons training. However, after seeing the very first UFC, he switched his focus to grappling. Steve Bongiorno joins us to discuss why people bond over jiu-jitsu, how he leads by example, what keeps him motivated after decades of training, and a ton more. Here's the RŌL Radio with Ricardo Almeida black belt, owner and instructor of South Jersey BJJ, and a New Jersey Martial Arts Hall of Fame member, Steve Bongiorno.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live.
There we go.
Another great conversation ahead of
Yes.
us. Are you doing good today?
I'm great.
It seems like you're struggling.
What do you mean?
I
What
don't
was I
know.
struggling? I can
Everything.
remember one little thing, and then I'm struggling. No, today's been super productive.
You're always amazing when we get on the air. And then the moment we off the air, you're like stumbling, and almost like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, my real life is as terrible as my jiu-jitsu. This my fake podcast life is. I'm pretty special now. I'm getting it all together, right?
Life is good.
It is. It is.
We had a picnic this weekend.
We did. We had the annual picnic, the Academy picnic, not the podcast picnic, because that one's just me and you. Yeah, we had the all the members, the families. It was a huge turnout. It was a blast. Old faces, new faces. You know, guys that like signed up Friday night to become members,
And they showed
were
up.
at the picnic on Saturday. So it was really a good time. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
super
good
happy.
stuff. Those things. By the way, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
We start chatting about this, but I'm curious to hear your perspective. Like, you know, we engage in this jiu-jitsu activity that we all have a lot of passion, and then yet there is this community component around it. And like one of the more frequently asked questions or conversations that takes place around instructors and students is like, how come we create such a strong bond while we train? Like, why is in events like picnics or going to dinner or hanging out, why is there such a strong bond between different individuals as we train jiu-jitsu?
I have to take from what Master Henzo once said to me a long time ago, and that's that the mats and fighting reveal who you really are as a person. So, you know, we all have our Facebook life, right? You could be strong and powerful and confident, but when you get on that mats, the mats don't lie. So I feel that when we train jiu-jitsu with somebody, we actually reveal our inner and true character to each other. So I actually get to know you on a more intimate level, because if you are full of bravado and I get you in mount and you tap, well, your true self is kind of told. The same note, if you're the person that goes really, really hard, but as soon as they get tired, they sit out for a couple rounds, your true character is revealed. So I just feel, even though what we do in jiu-jitsu isn't necessarily fighting, I think we reveal our inner and true self to each other when we're on the match training. So I think that when you perform that bond with somebody, it just transcends the mats.
Is this what they refer to often as jiu-jitsu lifestyle, meaning beyond just this art or sport, however, whichever direction you're taking this, but it's just even the ability of just be there and interact with people. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think everybody has a part, and everybody is your teacher. And when you become part of this community, you just kind of feed off each other, you help each other, you support each other. And whether you're, like you said, you're a brand new student on Friday, or somebody who's been training with you for 15 years, everybody has something to offer that community. And that's what I love about jiu-jitsu.
You said something interesting just a moment ago. Everybody is a teacher. And oftentimes, I love hearing that, by the way, because oftentimes we, especially at the beginning of that journey, of the exploration of jiu-jitsu, we look up at the black belt, we look up at the instructor, we look up at the leader, and we oftentimes find them as the source of the information. But yet we are surrounded by all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is your day one, everybody knows more than you. I mean, that's the truth, right?
100%.
So how come we gravitate towards that person in the middle versus really being open-minded or learning from others? And I think that opens up a little bit more as we continue going through it, right? We find our training partners' preferences and all that, we work together. But at the beginning, it's hard to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. So again, everything I've learned in jiu-jitsu comes from basically 3 sets of people. Renzo Gracie, Ricardo Almeida, who's been my #1 instructor my entire jiu-jitsu career, and my training partners. So I go back to Ricardo saying at the academy, I am a resource. I am not the source of the academy. And then Renzo so famously quoted saying, never be deaf to someone's knowledge. I remember him talking about a knee bar that he learned watching a white belt do it at his academy. And he tweaked it. And if you watch the Carlos Newton match he had, it was the knee bar he almost hit on Carlos Newton. And Renzo, who I look up as like the top of the food chain in jiu-jitsu, if he can learn something watching 2 white belts roll, well, then who am I? You know, so it is hard because you do look at, historically, the black belt means the master. But look how far jiu-jitsu's come that more and more people are getting involved. So as Ricardo would always say, all of us is smarter than any one of us.
See, I love that quote. I love that phrase. And this really builds upon the simple fact that, especially in jiu-jitsu, even though jiu-jitsu oftentimes is considered as an individual sport, right? Like we are troubleshooting things by ourselves, but we can't train without our partners. So oftentimes it's being considered this hybrid environment where it is, we are on our own, but yet it is kind of sort of as a group effort, isn't it?
I agree. One of the statements I say at the end of class, I always say, hey guys, the most important part of class is thank your last training partner, because without them, you can't learn. And I would always say, you came into class thinking you were tough or not. Well, your training partner just lets you know. So without people to train, you can't get better. And again, another famous quote at Ricardo's academy was, to get twice as good in half the amount of time, train with twice as many people.
And so that, again, I mean, these are wise words. And we had, Professor Almeida on the show, and what a brilliant conversation it was with him, just to pick his brain on his philosophy. And I feel like it's a never ending path of knowledge when you talk to these guys, right? Yeah. And you had the opportunity to train with him and really pick his brain on a daily basis. And do you feel like you're lucky cat having access to those 2 guys? I mean, just alone, Professor Almeida and Professor Henzo. I mean, that's like unstoppable knowledge there, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't train a lot with Master Henzo, but I got to interact with him once in a while. But I like to say, like, I'm a really watered down, bad version of Ricardo. I started training with him when I was 26.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on. Is that a compliment or not? Like, how do we take it?
That's a compliment on him and a really negative on me. I just find Ricardo to be one of the smartest, highest fight IQ instructor I've ever had. So I always considered him my number one resource. You know, so being able to watch him teach brand new white belts and yet get Frankie Edgar ready for a championship bout. Watching him train just a normal mom or dad, and then have Eddie Alvarez or Edson Barbosa or Marlon Moraes or Corey Anderson on the mats. Like, it just goes to show you his depth, but how jiu-jitsu reaches everybody, not just the top tier. It's for everybody.
But isn't that what makes good instructors? The ability to connect with almost everybody, right? The ability of saying, you are the professional and this is what you need, but you are just the hobbyist, and, you know, perhaps physical attributes are not in your favor, and we still can do jiu-jitsu, but we need to change this to this perspective. We need to have this outlook, and we need to do it a certain way. Isn't that's what makes good instructors and phenomenal coaches?
100%. I won't mention the team because I don't want to get in trouble online, but many, many years ago, there was a team with knowing having like the best MMA champions.
Mm-hmm.
But they were known that to be part of that team, you would have to go through a rigorous initiation process where you might get knocked unconscious 2 or 3 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you survived, you became part of that fight team. So what Ricardo said to me one day was, so what they're basically doing is weeding out those who won't survive that environment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those guys would be successful no matter where they go. And then he pointed out somebody on our team that was going to school to be a lawyer, training 2 regular jiu-jitsu classes a week, but was able to win one of the best tournaments in the world at that time. And he said, that proves that, and he didn't say himself, he said, this what proves our instruction works. Because he shouldn't be that successful, but he was. That's what makes you a good instructor, not just getting rid of all those that wouldn't survive and only therefore have a position for the strongest among us.
I feel like that's the old school mentality, and I think that's not only one place, but many places have adopted that in the past. You know, and I again, you know, I started 20 plus years ago too, so like I've seen some of that evolution taking place over time, but I do feel like that was the old school kind of way of thinking. Is like, if you can't hang with us, you shouldn't be here. This is the toughest of the toughest, right? Like, this is the Shark Tank room and things of that nature. Versus today, I think things have evolved a little bit. One, we can cater towards a larger demographic, but 2, jiu-jitsu is not necessarily all about beating up people, but there's more behind creating this community and helping each other and working with each other and stimulating ourselves more mentally than physically. Would you agree with the fact that jiu-jitsu is more mentally stimulating than physically?
I agree. And here's why. If you have a severely talented, strong student, he doesn't necessarily need jiu-jitsu. That 20-something-year-old who's never done anything physical, might be slightly overweight, doesn't know how to defend themselves. They're the ones that need it. So, yes, as instructors, we love having our students on podiums and winning. But we should never negate the fact that that 20-year-old who's never done anything physical in their life, they're the ones that really need jiu-jitsu. And the culture at my academy is that I really try to push for, because I have a lot of MMA fighters that won, you know, championship belts and fight pro, is that you might be 21 years old, physically stronger and more powerful than that 50-year-old brown belt you're training with, but you don't know what they know. So if you cater the training, you'll be able to get a big benefit from them, even though you might be able to outpace them, outgas them, outmuscle them. But it's the jiu-jitsu you're after.
I think what you're referring to is like performance versus education, right? Like
I love that.
performance is driven by achieving a certain goal to win something, right? But education is almost ongoing. It goes into infinity. It is how much information I can gather and benefit myself from a learning perspective. These are two different objectives, aren't they?
I agree. And at some point, your performance will no longer be there because no matter how hard we try, the body will start to fail us.
You know, we had Zanji here on the phone, and we bring up Zanji so many times, but we had Zanji on the show, and essentially that's what we hear is like not how long you train, but the wear and tear that you have on your body that's what catches up with you, you know? So if you don't think about this ahead of time, well, you get to your 30s, 40s, 50s, and then like first, you can't close your hands, your fingers are like, you know.
So a quick story to relate to that. I remember when I walked in Ricardo's school, he handed me a paper. And it said, "You're cordially invited to Steve Bongiorno's black belt ceremony." And I was like, I said, "No, Ricardo, I'm not ready. Give me 2 more years." And my last name is Bongiorno, so he always called me Bongiorno. He's like, "Bongiorno, you're getting your black belt, like it or not." And I was like, "I'm not ready." He said, "Listen, you're getting your black belt. You can wear it with pride. You can wear it with shame. That's up to you." And I said, "What did I ever do to deserve a black belt?" Now, mind you, I'm 5'8", I'm 135 pounds. And he said, "You survived. You never should have survived." So then fast forward, I'm getting my black belt, and behind me is Ricardo Almeida, Renzo Gracie, Half Gracie, and the late Ryan Gracie. And my black belt speech was, "I may never be a world champion. I might be getting tagged by every white belt in this room, but 50 years from now, I will still be training. The question is, will you?" And that was the day I got my black belt, 7/11/2005.
See, I love this. I love this story because it just highlights this simple fact that is not how good you are, but the consistency and almost, Gary and I talk about this. I often say, like, you know, I've been in this business for this long because I'm just too stupid to quit. And there's some logic behind this. It's just keep coming, keep showing up, and everything slowly starts making sense. Just keep being there.
How do you get your students over those challenges and hurdles though, where they're like, because that's hard to convince somebody of that they've got to be in it for the long haul, because we always want stuff right away. So to convey that hey man, you know, you're going to have your struggles. It's not always going to be smooth. You're not always going to be feeling like you're good in the room. How do you get those people to really stick with it?
By simple words, I would just say by example. So going back, I was Ricardo's first staff member, and I was working a full-time day job. I was teaching full-time at night, an hour away from my house, and I worked for the electric company, which means some days I would go to work, jiu-jitsu, back to work, back to jiu-jitsu. I have 4 kids. It was just a nightmare. I was getting 3 hours of sleep a night. And Ricardo pulled me in his office one day, and I knew I was in trouble. And he's like, "Bongiorno, a year, you're going to be dead or you're going to quit. Because I don't know how you do what you do every day." He said, "So I'm firing you to go open up a school by where you live." He said, "I still want you here twice a week." And I was like, "Ricardo, like, I'm going to open up a school, but what do I owe you?" And he said, "You owe me nothing except one thing. There's no such thing as a black belt that doesn't train. So I'm going to ask of you what I ask for one-day white belts, that you train jiu-jitsu minimum twice a week." So fast forward, I'm 50 years old. I'm still 5'8", 135 pounds, severe neck injuries, sublimated shoulder. And you know what? I still train 3 days a week. So when I say by example, it's when I have a 40-year-old student who's injured and I tell him to keep training, he knows that I'm 50 with an injury and I'm still training. So there's not much words. It's by the example that I lead. Again, not that I'm this great person, but it's my small impact. I'm hurt. I'm tired. I'm injured. I'm training. You're hurt. You're tired. You're injured. Just train. Train smart. Train with the right people. But I just believe that instructors, we have to lead by example.
You mentioned something again. I mean, there's nothing but wisdom you're dropping here today, but you mentioned something just a moment ago, train smart. And that phrase right there oftentimes is underestimated. I feel like a lot of students, they put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform at a certain level. And oftentimes that level is defined by themselves. So they set certain expectations of themselves, and they want to deliver to that expectations. And then often this is where burnout comes in, and injuries and other things. And then we start second guessing ourselves, and this whole thing about plateau kicks in, and it's like a domino effect at that point. And returning from that, at least in my mind, is very difficult and oftentimes not achievable in that mindset. What do you consider as training smart?
I believe that the majority of your training should be to get better at jiu-jitsu. Not to get in your car and pat yourself on the back because you tapped out 3 higher belts and didn't tap out to that 1 black belt. I often tell my teen students at the end of class, you have 2 questions to answer when you're walking out my door today. What did I learn? And who did I help? Because if you didn't learn anything and you didn't help anyone, you didn't get better at jiu-jitsu. So again, a lot of my wisdom comes through experience with Ricardo. Case in point, he came back from training. He was in the prime of his competition career, and he went to his strength conditioning coach, and he was talking about how great of a session he had at Henzo's. And his coach was like, so what did you learn? He's like, man, I trained with like 6 black belts. I trained for like 3 hours. And he's like, yeah, what did you learn? He said, man, you're not listening. I trained for like 3 hours with like 6 black belts. And his coach looked at him and said, you just wasted 3 hours of your life. You trained for 3 hours with 6 black belts. You can't tell me one thing you learned. You could have trained for 10 minutes, learned one thing, and your time would have been better spent. So often when I tell students who are reaching plateaus, I go, so are you working on your arm lock defense? Are you letting white belts mount you and just working on the mount escapes?
Mm-hmm.
Don't come to class to try to beat somebody. Come to class and work on your deficiencies. Listen, I'm the head black belt of the school. If I'm going to let a white belt pass my guard, you're a blue belt. Why can't you let the white belt pass your guard? You're afraid of your reputation?
I'll tell you, Steve, this is brilliant. I love this because I so much share that mentality, but yet at the same time, let me challenge this. Because when we are at that level, white, blue, even sometimes at purple, our ego is so high that I can't let them pass my guard. Why would I let them do this? No, it's a war I'm fighting. I have to prove something to somebody or to myself. Like there's so many disengagement pros and conflicts in our head. And oftentimes, all that is stopping us from getting better. Because how can you learn how to escape armbar if you are not in that position, right? You can watch videos. I mean, not many can. You can watch videos, memorize it, and actually put applicable use while you are rolling, right? I mean, that doesn't happen often, maybe a handful of times. But why do we stop ourselves from that? Why can't we say, you know what? Today, I'm going to escape mount, and I will let everybody mount me, and I'm going to work on this.
So a good friend of mine, Amal Easton, once said...
Oh, I love Amal.
Amal's man. He said, the problem with jiu-jitsu is you walk into the academy, right, with an ego, and you get your butt kicked by everybody. So you lose your ego, but you keep training. Well, something happens. You get better at jiu-jitsu. Then you start kicking everybody's butt. But then you turn 40, and now the body starts failing, and you start getting beat up again. So you got to lose your ego all over again. So what I do is I change the ego in my brain. I specifically have this one black belt that's really good at my academy, and every time I train with him, it's a joke. Like, I know if he sweeps me, he'll go 2 points. Or like if he, it's a joke amongst us because he's been one of my top students for a really long time. But I know when I train with him, I got to be on my A game because not that he would brag about anything, but I know the joke amongst us. So one day I was really hurt. I hurt my back. I couldn't move my right arm. And this is how I changed it in my brain. I went, I can't move my low back. It hurts so bad. My right arm's not working. So you're going to pass my guard. He's going to mount me. He's going to take my back. But I went, but you still ain't going to tap me. That's the ego I kept in my brain. So I changed it from me tapping him to saying, yeah, I'm going to let you mount me, but you're still not going to submit me. So there's still somewhat of an ego involved in that. But to me, it's a smarter use of your ego because it's acquired to skill acquisition as opposed to just leaving with your chest puffed out.
Sure. Yeah. But see, this is what I'm talking about. It's like we can really get smart about this, and we can really train jiu-jitsu in a very healthy way without some of these engagements in our head. So like for one person, passing the guard could be objective. For the other person, could be not getting mounted. Now, in order for you not to get mounted, you got to let them pass, right? For the third person, they're going to let them pass, let them get mounted, but they're not going to let them submit. So these are three different points of engagement. And, you know, if we look at a competition, that's different. You know, at a competition, each of them, there's a regression that takes place. We're losing points, or points are getting rewarded to somebody else. Our objective is to win. But when we are on a mat to learn, when we are on the mat to get better, our focus should continue shifting. One, based on what our goal is, but two, based on who our partner is, isn't it?
Yep. So your words, the words I use are, as a student, you have to take your progress into your own hands.
Absolutely, 100%.
Because as instructors, we're teaching to a broad array of students. I had 40 people at my class on Saturday morning, and that's 40 different lives and goals. So I'm going to teach a broad sense of technique, but that student has to take their progress into their own hands in many, many ways. Of course, we're going to hold the hands of the white belts. But you start getting blue and purple, you got to start understanding that you're going to take the lessons your instructor's imparting on you, and you're the one that's going to do the reps. Practice the other side. Work the defenses. You're the one that's going to put yourself in bad positions. So I've had a long relationship with Gary Tonin. And through the Ricardo Almeida Renzo Gracie Association, and training with him every Saturday, I realized like how he trains versus how he competes, where he'll allow himself to be put in bad positions and almost get submitted and let people pass his guard. And then he goes to competition. None of that happens to him because he allows it to happen in training. So that when it matters, which is because listen, I always tell my students, who won the Super Bowl 5 years ago? Nobody knows. They go, nobody cares. You might care that blue belt tapped you, but I promise you tomorrow, nobody cares. So just show up and get better. Be smart. Take your progress in your own hands. And good jiu-jitsu training is good for everybody. Bad jiu-jitsu training is not good for anybody.
Yeah, and that's some smart, that's some wise words right there. You know, I told this story on I think previous episodes, but this thing happened to me. This is years ago when my son was in swimming and he was on a swim team, and it just popped in my mind. So if you don't mind, I'll share that. But
I love it.
It's, you know, I'm sitting at the edge of the pool and I see this guy pacing up and down the pool. You know, and the big talker and curiosity that I might go to, and it's like, you know, hey, how are you? Make a small talk, and you know, and so I find out that he's actually a coach, and he coached an Olympic team for one year. I was like, oh, that's gold. Like, I'm gonna dig this one, okay? So like, I'm asking him all these questions, blah blah. But then I come up with my smartest comment or smartest question. I was like, so what makes a good swimmer? Like, how do you become a good swimmer? He goes, no, get in the pool. And I was like, well, thanks, genius. I literally said it, like, well, thanks, genius. But, like, that's not a wisdom. I was like, no, you don't understand. You can't be good at swimming if you don't get in the pool. It all starts with the step one. It all starts with this very fundamental thing, getting in the water. And then we start talking about this, you know, and the conversation went in a very interesting direction. But the whole point is, it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. Like, if we are so hung up on these things that are irrelevant, we will never learn. We will never progress. We will never get better at this. If we so hyper-focus on not getting tapped, we will never learn how to escape. If we are so hyper-focused on not allowing the guard to be passed, we will never know what to do in side control, top control. We got to continue adapting to these situations. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. I often tell my students the only reason why I'm qualified to teach this class is because I tapped out more than all of you across my decades of training. And I often tell them this, knowledge without experience is not true knowledge. You can show me an arm lock escape. That's much different than me letting me put you in an arm lock and you escaping. So it goes back to, if you want to get good at all aspects of jiu-jitsu and you're not showing up and experiencing all aspects of jiu-jitsu, you're not going to gain true knowledge of that. I think Bruce Lee was quoted as saying, if you have a really good right leg roundhouse kick, why do you go to the gym and practice a right leg roundhouse kick when your left leg roundhouse kick sucks?
Mm-hmm.
You should be going to the gym and working on the left leg, not the one that's already good. But so many times we'll go to the academy and we'll practice that same loop choke, that same arm lock that you're good at. But meanwhile, you can't get out of a heel hook.
Yeah.
So you got to work those things. And if you don't experience them, it's not true knowledge.
Well, and again, you mentioned important stuff. It's like we hyper focus on our A game and we continue exploring that. We continue being playful with it, but we're not really engaging the fact that, the other side or the other component is really, needs improvement. And if we just did focus just a little bit on it, everything would be changed. Everything would be different. Our game would be different. Our approach to this would be different. And oftentimes, reaching back or connecting back to what we just talked about a moment ago, these quote unquote plateaus or difficult parts, like the percentage of those will be so much lower because we continue stimulating ourselves. We continue getting better, right? Because nobody wants to suck. Everybody wants to get better. This is why we get on the mats.
Yep.
Right. Steve, how did it all start for you? I mean, you've been on the mat for a few decades at this point. You talk about engaging with all these brilliant minds. Your academy is beautiful and big, and there is a point of success that it's at least visible to the Instagram eye, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
How did this all start? Do you remember your very first day on the mat?
I remember it all. There is no doubt in my mind I was put on this earth to do martial arts. So,
lay it out.
So when I was a young boy, under the age of 10, Black Belt Theater was out, Bruce Lee was out, and I was completely obsessed, which makes zero sense. My family's mostly Italian, part Irish from Brooklyn, New York. Yet here I am watching Black Belt Theater, running through my house doing flips over couches. But
how did your father respond to that?
My dad, he loved boxing. He's an old Italian guy from Brooklyn. He loved boxing. But we were a great family. We were always fed, but we weren't like rich. So the idea of putting me in martial arts instruction was always out of the question. So one day my dad walked in and he was at his job and a kid walked in a gi. Not a kid per se, because there was really no kid martial arts back when I started. But he's like, "Oh, your kid does karate, probably costs $100 a month, right?" And she said, "No, it's $15." My dad was like, "Where do you train?" So he came to me and he said, "Steve, don't set your heart on it, but I might be able to enroll you in karate class." So he brings me to a gymnasium from a black belt that was just renting space out of a local school 3 days a week. He put me in class, and my dad sat down to watch, and he said he said in his brain, "Steve's going to last 2 weeks." Because there was no flips, there was no spin kicks, there was no swords. 40 years later...
Is that what you envisioned as a class, what it should look like?
I'll be honest, I didn't have any expectation. I just wanted to be a martial artist.
Okay.
I had no expectation. I loved it all. When I saw that guy in a gi wearing a black belt, it was like, I don't know, meeting Jesus for the first time. But that was like a really big blessing in my life, because what I didn't realize was that karate school, like, there was no terms like mixed martial arts back then. It was called eclectic. If you mixed styles, you were eclectic. Well, the style was Taekwondo Muay. But the guy who brought Taekwondo Muay to my instructor was a black belt in Judo, Okinawan Kempo, and Aikido. So although the base was Taekwondo Muay, I learned a hip throw. I learned an arm lock. I learned a rear naked choke. And what these guys were smart enough to realize, that everybody in the martial arts has something to offer. So this is a convoluted story, but just stay with me. Mm-hmm. So now 7 years later, I'm getting my black belt in Taekwondo Muay. And my instructor says, you have to pick a specialty. What are you talking about? Every black belt that gets a black belt in the system developed gets a specialty. So let's make believe all of us have different specialties. Well, as black belts, I teach you my specialty. You teach me your specialty. Now we grow as black belts. So 1993, the UFC came out. I had picked weapons as my specialty. 1993, the UFC came out. I switched to grappling. Somehow I found a jiu-jitsu guy that was teaching out of a karate school and started training under him. It was Kenyona Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. And that was the beginning. That was 1996. I was watching, let me go back. 1993, I started watching judo books and any VCR tape I could find on grappling or Black Belt magazine or anything on grappling, and would take a student and practice it. 1996, I meet a jiu-jitsu instructor, start training at him, but he quickly moves away. I go to the karate store to pick up gis for my karate students, and there is a flyer for a grappler's quest. And I'm like, I'm entering a jiu-jitsu tournament. No idea what to expect.
I love this.
So I go to this karate tournament, this jiu-jitsu tournament wearing karate gi pants. And
how were you received?
So here's the funny part. Sitting next to me was all Team Renzo Gracie. They were so excited that I, as a karate student, entered a jiu-jitsu tournament that one of the guys is famous today named Joe Capizzi. He's still one of my good friends because he was shaking my hand and saying, man, this is awesome. We're so happy that you tried jiu-jitsu, like keep it up. So he's still friends with me to this day. But at that tournament, there was a guy named Kasha Hound, Big Dog, Ricardo Almeida that had a super fight. So I get done my division. I actually rear naked choke one guy with no hooks. Got beat by a 2-year Michigan State college wrestler in the beginners division in my next match. And now I'm watching these super fights. And my karate instructor was coaching me because he was well-versed in all aspects of martial arts. Not a jiu-jitsu expert, but he knew enough to help me. And he said, I'm not really impressed with what I'm seeing here today. And then Ricardo starts to compete and he kicks me. And I'm like, what? He's like, look at that guy's hips. That guy knows jiu-jitsu. So I started karate in Willingboro, New Jersey. The next town over is a town called Edgewater Park. Ricardo Almeida was teaching jiu-jitsu in Edgewater Park, New Jersey, next to the town I grew up in. So after that tournament, the next month I became a student, and I've been a student ever since. 1999, March of 1999. 2005. Sorry?
Did you meet Ricardo at the tournament, or did you
Nope.
meet him for the first time when you went to his academy?
So what a funny story was, there was an article in a magazine, I think it was called Full Contact Fighter or Submission Grappling Magazine. I forget which one it was. It had an expose on him, and at the bottom was his email address. And back then, I didn't know it was Gracie Baja. I emailed a guy named Barra Dog, and he never responded to me. So when I was looking at Ricardo's article, it was him who I emailed probably a year before. So I just showed up as an academy. He took me in like I was a student for 20 years, and I've been training with him ever since. I told him when he kicks me out, I don't do jiu-jitsu anymore. So along that pathway, I started training with him in 99. In 2005, 2004-ish, I started teaching for him. And that's what led to me running my own academy 2 years after that.
Isn't it interesting how, have you ever thought about this? How your life would be different if that one day your dad didn't come up to you and say, listen, you're gonna try this. I can't promise this to you, but we're gonna give this a shot.
Yes. It's funny, I talk to him now and he's like, I never thought you would have made it. I thought you'd have quit like 30 years ago.
Well, that was my next question. It was a follow-up. Is like, what's your dad's perspective on all of this? Because not only this all started kind of with, you're not going to survive 2 weeks, but now not only you did survive 2 weeks, now you have your own academy. Many would find it as one of the more successful academies on the East Coast. And then you are making impact to hundreds.
Yeah. So forget my dad, it's my wife. So I'm working a full-time job. I'm training whenever I can. And she literally looked at me and said, when are you going to quit this stuff and become an adult? And I looked my wife in her eyes and I said, one day I'm going to be a purple belt and I'm going to make money off jiu-jitsu. I was doing martial arts before I met you, and I'll be doing martial arts when you're gone.
When did you meet your wife? At which point? What rank were you? Like when you guys met?
Oh, I wasn't even training when we were dating.
Okay, so she knows you through this whole thing.
She knows me as a karate student. So, I've known her since I was in high school. And she's the number one person in my life, but it's a funny story nonetheless. she doesn't understand the impact of jiu-jitsu. Me watching karate guys get tapped out by Royce Gracie like destroyed me. So I'm like, I need to pursue and see what these guys are learning so I could teach my karate guys how to defend Royce Gracie stuff. So then I started doing jiu-jitsu, but, we started having more kids. The job is getting more rigorous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm poor and I can't afford to train. And so from her perspective, she was 100% right. But there's no doubt in my mind that I was put on this earth to be a martial artist. There's no doubt. People wonder what they should be doing. I know exactly what I should be doing, and that's going to the academy at 5 o'clock tonight to teach 4 classes. There's no doubt in my mind what I should be doing.
So now reflecting on life, you are in a position of making impact on so many people, from kids to adults and athletes and professionals. Do you feel like you are fulfilling that destiny in a sense of being in the position of making that impact on others?
I guess an easy way for me to put it is I don't feel I deserve anything in life.
So why?
I work every day for it.
Why? Why do you say that?
It's how I'm wired. Like if I give my student my all and he loses, I didn't give him enough. So I feel that, of course, I feel I deserve good things in life. Let me rephrase that. The amazing things that have happened to me, I look back and say, I'm just a normal, everyday person. Why did these amazing things happen to me? So when I reflect on my life, it's always a matter of, I'm just going to keep working hard. I'm going to keep putting my all into this thing. Because if I don't, and I become complacent, then it all goes away. And I lose that student that came to me and said, thank you for jiu-jitsu because I was being bullied and I'm no longer being bullied. Or that adult that came to me and said, hey, I'm off my blood pressure medicine. Or that student that wins that tournament. So I feel that I work every day really hard to make sure that I keep that impact and I keep impacting people for the good. I don't know if that answered your question.
No. It's a great point of conversation, because I think many people do. First of all, many people do struggle with having a job or career they really don't like. And I feel in a similar way as you that we are lucky. We are lucky to be in a position to do what we love and plus impact people and change lives. As cliche as it sounds, it's true. Yep. But what drives you to get up every day? Like, what is this one thing that makes Steve get up with a smile on his face and go to the academy and do what he does?
Severe love for God, my family, and my students. It's all love. My family deserves my best. My God deserves my best. My students deserve my best. So if I don't wake up and do my sauna cold plunge and then go teach afternoon class, I'm letting them down. If I don't take my vitamins and lift my weights, I'm letting them down. If I don't train gi, no gi, and get some light sparring with my MMA guys, I'm letting them down. And it's all because of love. I need to do a good job so I can feed my family, give my wife and my kids what they deserve. I need to give my students what they deserve. And I promised Ricardo that I would make him proud. And I live by this one philosophy. Renzo Gracie came to this country with sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears to build this jiu-jitsu thing. Who am I to let him down? Who am I to break the mold and to let this thing go backwards? I need to find jiu-jitsu better than I found it, and that's my goal. Because I love jiu-jitsu that much.
That's a heavy burden, isn't it? Yeah,
but it's what keeps me 50 and young. I mean, I say that sincerely, who wouldn't love to sleep till noon and smoke a cigar in a patio on a beach somewhere? But then I won't be me.
Listen,
I need that struggle. I need that struggle.
Well, and many do think, looking from outside in, that life of a jiu-jitsu instructor is simple. We come and we teach one class, we go, we do some surfing, and we eat acai all day long. That's all we do. But the reality of life is much different, right? I mean, there's a lot of pressures that are associated with the role that you're in, or any instructor for that matter, right? Yep. There's a lot of responsibility that we carry behind what we do and how we do it. So I personally do appreciate every good instructor that's out there, especially the one who's contributing in such an active way as you have, and you continue doing it. Are you envisioning for any of this to stop anytime soon?
Man, I'm blessed in many ways. I have a 21-year-old son who's my clone. He's been training since he was 6.5. I just gave him his brown belt. There's going to be a smooth transition one day from my academy, from me running it full time to him running it full time. But the joke in my house is my retirement is me teaching one jiu-jitsu class a day. If I can get to the point where I can teach one jiu-jitsu class a day, then I would consider myself retired.
Good for
But
you.
yeah, so I'm blessed in that my family's involved. My wife is my program director. My two other sons train, and my son helps me run the academy.
Good for you. I mean, many dream of a life like this, and you are living it. And I think that's a great example of one, American success, and two, truly loving what you do and embracing the grind and continue growing and continue making that impact on not only your family but the larger family, the community. Just like we started the conversation at the very beginning, all of this.
Yeah, I often tell my students, if I had 100 more students, I'd live the life they think I live.
Would you though? You'd work harder, wouldn't you? I bet you would work harder. Yeah.
Because you're now responsible for 100 more people.
Right. Yeah.
Who need your guidance, your love, your care. So yeah. I'm just kidding myself.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, everything you just said, about giving your best and doing it out of love, as it grows, you're invested in it. So you're probably going to stick with it and give more.
But as an instructor, I often tell people, like, my greatest joy of running a jiu-jitsu academy are the people.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, what's the worst thing about running a school? I said, it's easy. It's the people. Right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's you touch on something really important and sensitive at the same time. But yeah, we are in people business. Yep,
we are in a people business, Yeah. But it's if you can get out of the mount position, you should be able to work with somebody that's not too easily worked with, right? Well, if the lessons on the mat don't transcend off the mat, then you're kind of missing what the mats are for.
Well, exactly. I was about to say. I mean, isn't that part of the jiu-jitsu is really that translation or that correlation between truly or real life. If we can troubleshoot things in a life-death-like situation when somebody is choking us or stabbing us or punching us, why can't we figure out how to have a conversation with somebody? Sometimes that's a mind-blowing part to me.
Yep.
But I mean, listen, we work with people and we are in people business. That's a big part of it. Listen, Steve, you've interacted with a lot of great names, a lot of big personalities. I mean, from Hanzo, from the very top to many others. If you were to pinpoint one piece of wisdom that you have learned, perhaps didn't share with many, but it's kind of stuck with you deep inside, is there one?
Yes. I was at a jiu-jitsu tournament, and I was a white belt. I had been training for 1 year and 3 months. And I had like an 80% submission ratio. I was just tapping everybody. And back then, there wasn't many tournaments, but I was doing really well. So as a white belt, I entered the intermediate division, and I submitted the top guy in that division with a knee bar. So then I was watching, and then in between the no-gi and the gi division, Ricardo gave me my blue belt. So I was watching the blue belt division, and this guy was killing I was watching the advanced no-gi division. This guy was killing everybody. And I looked at my buddy, and I was like, man, I'm glad I don't got to go against that guy. He's like, no, you do. I'm like, what do you mean? He's in the advanced division. He's like, yeah, but he's a blue belt. So I get one blue belt. I'm a brand new blue belt. I tap this one guy out. I beat this one guy by points, and I go to war with this guy. And he ends up beating me on points in overtime. And it was a war. So I'm like collecting my thoughts, and I was talking to Matt Serra. He was at the tournament. Love Matt Serra. And I said, Matt, I have to ask you a question. How do you not let yourself get psyched out before a match? And I'm going to clean the version up so there's no cursing, but Matt said, I trained with Renzo Gracie. You trained with Ricardo Almeida. They got the problems, not us. And that stuck with me forever. I trained with one of the greatest minds in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What are you going to give me that I haven't seen or heard before? Nothing. Well, the lineage is strong.
and that puts in a perspective of real life too. It's like how many times we think that our problem is the biggest one in the world, and versus there are people who have by far bigger problems, or even our there's always somebody who has experienced what we are experiencing, and oftentimes we just don't take that under consideration as we go through these points of anxiety, and it just really wears on us, and it makes it much harder, isn't it?
Yeah, you asked me about like a point of wisdom, but there was one individual time that taught me more than words. We're at Ricardo's, we're training hard. I'm the smallest guy on the mat, and we're doing competition training before regular class. And the rule was you do comp class, you got to do the gi class next. So I popped my ankle really bad. I'm literally 50 pounds lighter than everybody in the room. So I'm on the ground in my gi with ice on my ankle. And this 280-pound guy kicks open the door of the gym because we were in a racquetball court room. And instantly, Ricardo's eye turns to him and was like, "What's up, man?" And the guy's like, "I want to fight somebody." And Ricardo looks at this guy and was like, "Pick a guy." And I'm on the ground looking at my ankle. It's swollen. I got ice on it. And I'm like, he's going to pick me. I'm a purple belt. He's going to pick me. And he goes, "I want him." Points right at me. I stand up. I jump on my bad ankle 4 times. And I'm like, "Ricardo, I think I'm good." And the guy goes, "Nah, man, I'm just playing. You guys order mats? I'm the truck driver. I got your mats out in the truck." Listen, I was like, I'm a purple belt. In martial arts, that's like God at that time, I'm like, if I lose, I'm in trouble. And Ricardo, when I brought the story to Ricardo, he's like, "Bongiorno, I knew you were going to kick the guy in the head and knock him unconscious anyway. Don't worry about it." But so it wasn't the words, but it was that, like, "Hey, man, you never know what's going to happen. Be ready. Broken ankle or not."
That's a funny story.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I like that.
That guy's got some cojones.
So what I said to Ricardo was, that guy's probably done that 100 times at different schools. And he was told martial arts is about self-defense. We don't believe in fighting. I said, he comes to your academy and you say, pick a guy. Like, that's just the difference,
Being on the mat for a few decades now. I mean, even if you take it from your childhood, I mean that's a long time that you've been training and exposed to martial arts in general. If you were to pinpoint one of the bigger points of evolution, one of the biggest changes in jiu-jitsu that you've seen since that 86 first class or 96 first class, what would it be in your mind?
It would probably be the evolution of competition and the different rule sets of competition and how people are gravitating certain aspects of their game to those competitions. So, like for me, as a karate student transitioning to jiu-jitsu because of the UFC, to me, jiu-jitsu was about fighting, right? It was about, fight goes to the ground, how to win a street fight, watching the Gracies in action intro tapes and all that stuff, to now, and this is not a knock on any sport because I love the sporting aspect of jiu-jitsu, but I think people are now gravitating more towards, maybe EBI or ADCC or things like that, more super fights, fight to wins and men of wars and things like that, where they're training for specific rule sets versus fighting in general. I think that's the biggest evolution that I've seen. And again, not that it's a bad evolution, unless you think that maybe that rolling leg lock or that flying triangle is going to save you in a street fight. As long as you understand what you're training for, I think it's all good.
Many do consider that even though the sport or the jiu-jitsu itself is going towards the sport route, the self-defense, even if you have the least amount of training, it seems like that you might be able to protect yourself on the street if something was to happen. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree. 100% agree.
Yeah.
Because what we do is we go against full resistance. We don't deal with cooperation when we train. So most people don't, in their training, they don't deal with they don't deal with full resistance. Like, I'm arm locking you. You're not letting me arm lock you, but I'm still arm locking you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I
Yeah.
think just that physical aspect of jiu-jitsu is what gives us an edge when it comes to self-defense.
So now pivoting from that, where do you think jiu-jitsu is going? Where do you like, I don't know, you're 80 and you're, chilling in a corner and your son is running the academy. What is this going to look like?
Oh man, like they talk about it being in the Olympics. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, let me ask you that. Let me throw you under the bus right here. Do you think it's a good idea for jiu-jitsu to be in the Olympics?
At this point, I'm going to say not yet, because we can't agree on a rule set, right? If you're in a points tournament, which was supposedly made for fighting, right? I take you down, that's good for a street fight, I get a word of points. If I pass your guard, that's good in the street fight, I get a word of points. If I mount you, that's good in the street fight. To submission only, where none of that matters. And then some of those submission only adds, well, nobody submitted, so we got to start on the back or the arm lock. So which is the rule set we're going to live by? Then you have IBJJF versus ADCC. IBJJF, I go for a straight ankle lock, I fall to my back, you get on top. That's you swept me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In ADCC, you initiated the ankle lock. You get on top, it doesn't matter because I initiated the ankle lock. And I'm not saying one is right or wrong. I'm just saying, how can we put it in this world envelope and we can't even agree on what rule set we should go by?
Yeah, that's the big point of conversations, right? Like the jiu-jitsu, and don't quote me on this, but I do think that jiu-jitsu is the only martial art or sport of that grappling flavor where there's a physical contact sport where we have so many flavors of rule sets, right? Like that doesn't exist in judo, that doesn't exist in karate or taekwondos. I mean, all of these sports of wrestling, there's a couple flavors of wrestling, but if you look at it, there's big organizations or one organization that runs it, and there's one rule set that kind of makes it all compliant into one umbrella. In jiu-jitsu, it appears like any direction you look, there's different rule sets, and at the same time, that's what makes jiu-jitsu so free-flowing and so experimental and so curious and so creative, isn't it?
It hasn't been a sport for very long.
I was going to say that's what... Sorry?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, to me, that's what makes jiu-jitsu so good, though. Mm-hmm. Because you could come in with a different personality and one of those competitions will appeal to you or that rule set will appeal to you. I just don't think it helps lending itself to one giant, broad, world-based sport. But I love the fact that my students can go to a a good fight and do a submission only, or one can go to a super fight match, or one can go to a IBJJF tournament, and no matter what they are looking for, they can find it in jiu-jitsu. I like that.
The diversity it creates this creativity in jiu-jitsu, if you will, and allows different people to engage from different points, right? And it's like you're not locked in this subset of rules of engagements. It's you can really free flow it in a sense, and I do think that's partially responsible for the fast growth of jiu-jitsu, because it's not so linear, right? It is very free flowing. Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to see how this is all gonna turn out in 10, 15, 20 years when we are teaching out one class a week and we kind of enjoying life. And I
really do believe in that when I'm 80 years old that a lot of people will be able to make a good living off jiu-jitsu because of the work of this generation. I think that a lot of people like I started my jiu-jitsu school 20 years ago, renting space out of a karate school twice a week, to a small storefront to a big storefront, where if I wanted to compete, I had to travel 5 hours away. And I think that in the near future, a lot of people will be able to make good amount of money doing this art that we love, whether they're teaching or not. Because let's face it, when we were coming up in jiu-jitsu, you competed, you made no money. Either you got sponsored or you ran a jiu-jitsu school based off your competition record. Mm-hmm. Well, now these guys are making money just competing, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think this is the testimonial to this sport getting more professional, if you will.
Yep.
One, there's these two divisions. One is the academy owners or instructors who can focus on that, and then there's these semi-professional athletes, which I think is just a matter of time when jiu-jitsu will become professional. I mean, you can see guys like Gordon Ryan, who are making a lot of money, competing, and at some point there'll be more than him, and there will be others, and they will follow, and the sponsors will continue flowing, and this will continue growing. And in my mind, this is just benefiting everybody. It raises popularity and makes the sport even better than what we have today. So next generation will have more opportunities to really live off of it and support their families, which I love.
And imagine the students they'll produce.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's the goal. Leave jiu-jitsu better than we found it.
I love that quote. I wrote that down. I got a lot of notes from you. A lot of wisdom you're sharing with us here.
I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, Steve, before we wrap this up, we've been in this for an hour, but before we wrap this up, what we do end of each episode, we have a question from you from our previous guest. Now, he didn't know who will be answering the question, so think of it as he asked a question completely in blind. Gary's going to take a lead on this, and always crazy.
I'm scared and excited.
I think we've touched on it. And this is one of those questions where we've kind of touched on it a little bit throughout the episode. But Scott Burr wants to know, how important do you think history and tradition are in jiu-jitsu, and are they still treated as such?
I believe history and tradition is important so that we know where we came from and why our founders did what they did, so that we cannot lose sight of the overall picture of what it is that we do. So like at my academy, right, coming from the idea of jiu-jitsu for fighting, all my fundamental classes are based on jiu-jitsu against somebody that might be trying to punch you, or self-defense scenarios, right? How to do a triangle choke, but how to do a triangle choke when they're trying to punch you. That's based off the history of knowing where jiu-jitsu came from. Now you get into my advanced class, we might be doing rolling Imanari rolls. So I think that it's important to know our history so we know where we came from, why they did what they did, so that we can make sure that the next generation doesn't lose sight of that.
Do you think that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, the origins of jiu-jitsu will be as known as they are today? I mean, let's be honest, jiu-jitsu is a fairly young sport if we take the origins from a Gracie family, right? And like that Brazilian flavor of it, but farther away we move away from it, some of the history starts fading away, and it just becomes a little forgotten as from generation to generation to generation.
I think it's already lost, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my student. I walked in the academy and he was trying a move. And I was like, "Are you trying that move that so-and-so competitor just did?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Here's the question. Why are you doing that? You should be doing it on the student he gave credit to who taught it. It was Lucas Lepre that did the move." I said, "Why are you studying that guy? Study Lucas. He's the one who did the move."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Who's that?" I'm like,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And this is unfortunate part of just evolution and us moving on, forward with time. But I think that happens all the time, right?
It
so like
everywhere with everything.
Well, absolutely, and we got guys who write books and have other platforms to talk about these things, and I think thanks to them, some of the history gets preserved. But do you think that 50 years from now, all this is going to be diluted, and jiu-jitsu is going to the thought about origins of jiu-jitsu is going to be different?
I believe it's going to be cyclical. So probably what will happen is at some point there'll be a resurgence for people wanting to use jiu-jitsu more in the self-defense, right? So I think everything moves in circles, right? Karate was a big deal. MMA starts, nobody does karate. The next thing you know, Lyoto Machida's kicking people in the face and karate's popular again.
Yeah.
So I think it all moves in cycles. So I think, it'll probably lose steam for a little while and then gain steam again and lose steam and gain steam again. Who knows?
So am I understanding you correctly? Are you saying that at some point jiu-jitsu might fade away to the point where it's not as popular as it is today?
No, what I mean is the focus of the training will change, right? Where it'll go from sport to, there'll be a resurgence of people wanting to do jiu-jitsu for self-defense. And then they'll go back and study the history of jiu-jitsu and be like, oh, this is why they did this. And then self-defense will get popular and then it'll go to sport again. And I just think it moves in circle. And I think jiu-jitsu will continue to become popular.
That's kind of like what happens with some of these concepts of techniques, like there's a hyper focus on leg locks, and some of the newer students think the leg locks were developed like 5 years ago. It's like,
Yep. Yeah, it was
Dean Lister were doing leg locks 20 years ago.
That was funny because I was watching the Craig Jones video.
Yeah.
Where he submitted the guy with the toe hold between his legs.
Yeah.
Did you see that match?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my students were like, "Oh, I'd never seen that before." And I pulled out a Hoyler Gracie book from 2003 and showed him the picture of him doing that move 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's.
And
awesome.
I'm like,
yeah.
Yes, you're just not exposed to that. That's all.
Yeah.
So it goes back to knowing the history and the origin. Who's Hoyler Gracie to somebody today? They don't know.
No, that's
to me. He was like my guy. He was my size. He was, one of the top competitors at the time I was starting to train. So.
But don't you think that some of that is our responsibility as instructors to expose our students to some of the history and like really make them aware of it?
100%.
Yeah. All this is going to continue growing, and I think we are a very unique time for jiu-jitsu as an art, as a sport, as an activity. And I feel like it's almost exploding in front of our eyes. Like it gets just like every day there's something new coming up, and it's so refreshing to see this.
Yeah.
And I hope the next generation can appreciate it as much as we do.
I agree.
Steve, if anybody wants to connect with you, anybody wants to visit your academy, where are you available? Website, social media, where are you at?
South Jersey Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 2 Route 73 South in Berlin, New Jersey. They can go on our website of www.sjbjj.com. If not, the best way is through Facebook or Instagram.
Phenomenal. Steve, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for sharing some of the phenomenal stories from your life, but also your wisdom and your experience and all the knowledge that you have compiled over the several decades that you've been on the mats. Gary?
Yeah, great stories. The history that you come from, it's funny, that's how we wrap things up, is great. And it's great to see you continuing all that. And I've got, I got a ton of notes as well. We always do a takeaway, and I think we got a lot to talk about. It's going to be hard to choose one topic. So I appreciate all of that entertainment.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.